All right, click the links, join the channel here over at subscribe to the various other links on how to see Peertube and whatnot. So Disney is cutting corners. The competency crisis comes to Disneyland. If Walt could see it today, he'd be rolling. So I thought this was interesting because it's more than just woke Disney, which is starting to show cracks, and it definitely is, as well as all the other companies. But Disney has a different history than Amazon, Netflix, Warner Brothers, and all those other kind of pop cultural companies that are all putting out just the same nonsense propaganda. They're marketing to an audience that almost doesn't exist. But Disney was different. It started differently. Like everyone knows what the 80s, if you're old enough, family-friendly Disney, or even 90s, was like. It was an entirely different company. So it shows that, it also shows that current America is so radically different from a few decades ago, to the point where if you look at Disney, you're like, this doesn't even make sense. Where in 55, when they opened the park, and you can go online and find a bunch of their old shows, they had a certain vibe to them, vaguely Christian, kind of family friendly, very positive. And then you look at the stuff they're doing now, and you're like, it's like they opened a portal into hell, so starting somewhere in the 90s, and they're firmly in it now. You look at the current stuff, and you look at Disney shows from the 60s, you're like, this is bizarre what they've done. Where are all the European people? We're just representing America. Somebody pointed that out. They were having a discussion about Disney on Post, and they're pointing out some shows, and they go, yeah, there's no people of the light in these shows at all. It's like, well, they're marketing essentially to an audience that doesn't exist, where it's just flashy lights and kind of name recognition of the old Disney. And this kind of thing, where companies seem to lose their direction or don't make sense in the current environment, is kind of happening widespread, where everything across America, we're seeing obviously standards slip. It's like flowers for Algeron, but at the national scale, as this experiment in commercial zone Weimar America is proving to be fatal. So the Disney that was possible, and even as recently as say the 90s, and in the 90s, 80s and 90s, Disney was a monster company. They were everywhere with their VHS tapes, and then they switched to DVDs, and they had stuff that was just, I mean, they owned the family-friendly market. But that Disney's just not possible today because the country's demographics are so radically different, and the new people don't have the same values for that family-friendly Christian Disney that they used to have. Obviously, and it feels like you go back and watch the Disney shows. You can go on BitChute and you search for them. You can find these Disney shows. It feels like it happened in a different world. It feels more. The shows happened way more than 50 years ago. Is what it feels. It feels more like 500 years ago. That's how massively. That's how quickly the country has changed. And obviously, Disney is no longer the Christian company it used to be. Even if it was light on that, but you knew they were at least on the right hand path. Now they worship Moloch, and I think that's pretty obvious. And it's not Disney anymore. It's just shiny lights and bright colors, where everything in the past is no longer politically correct, so everything has to be nerfed to accommodate the new audience who weren't even there 20 years ago. And the new audience is not into Disney in a way that you would have been in this 70s, 80s, 90s, even up to about 2000, when it kind of accelerated its change, because there's nothing to be into. It's just like, you're just looking at a commercial zone globalist company that'll jump on the latest bandwagon, and there's no firm foundation to Disney. It's completely removed from the original. And somebody said Disney was the last Christian studio, and that ended after Walt Disney. Now it's just another commercial zone, soulless garbage, which is kind of what America has turned into. So it's perfect. And if I had said some of those things about the things I say about America now, in maybe the 80s or 90s, those would be fighting words. And I say it now, and people who would be fighting me 30 years ago would be like, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, totally. This is a mess. So there's a few things going on with the quality. I mean, because it's like you just can't ignore what's happening as things fall apart. There's a few things going on with the quality control issues at Disney, using AI prints from Redbubble, I guess. Woke hiring is unfortunately not the same as hiring on merit. It might feel good to virtue signal, but the end result is not going to be as good. And the other thing that's going on is diversity destroys social cohesion and the ability to work together at a high level on projects. So those things are also happening within Disney and in other areas as well as, hey, Boeing, how's it going? The other, Boeing, we don't need senior engineers because the aircraft has, I don't know what they call it, like peaked out. You know, it's like there's not a whole lot more evolution to the shape of an aircraft type of thing. Fair enough. It's an aluminum tube with turbofans, right? Okay, that's true. So we're going to fire the chief engineers and outsource it to Indian engineers for $9 an hour. Oh, so what happened? The planes are falling out of the sky? Good luck with that. So the other thing is that they're buying stuff from China, and that's a serious problem as well because it means that those things are not made in America, and Chinese stuff is absolute garbage that gets used short term and then goes into a garbage dump, a landfill, just filling landfills. And what happened to the left wing environmentalists? So somehow they don't seem to focus on that. Like, you know, it's environmentally friendly to make things in the country of origin, so you don't have to buy a flashlight from China that lasts 2 years, goes right into a landfill. Where you might have to pay more for it if you made it in America, but it would last you a lifetime, and that keeps natural resources in the ground, and it keeps this stuff out of garbage dumps. And left wingers are like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Where the stuff with India is going on now with Elon Musk and Schumer and Trump, who've suddenly seemed to have done a switch on his 2016 statement about visas. Even the left-wing people are going like, yeah, why don't you train Americans to do these jobs? So the right and the left is kind of very much agreed on that. So China's the world's polluter because they're sending a lot of stuff around the world instead of us just making it. And like you could fix that with the stroke of a pen simply by making tariffs on imports. Everything Disney is going to do is leading them to losing money, and they have been. Almost $1 billion last year because too many things are different now than some years ago when Disney was on top. This isn't really fixable, and some of it might not even be fixable because of federal laws with quotas and things like that with the Klaus Schwab DICE stuff. And it's also not fixable because the surrounding country is also kind of broken. So what would happen, just for the sakes of poops and giggles, how far am I into this? 7 minutes. Is if Disney started hiring on merit and it turned out to be like 90% European people look like you and I, which would be an overrepresentation when they're about 55% of the country, the woke crowd would say, whoa, Disney is istophobic. Because in their minds, for communism to work, globalism, socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, it's all closely related. Humans have to be fungible cogs in a machine. And the thing with political correctness is it's not a destination, it's a journey to seize control and destroy. It never ends. It just functions to destroy whatever it's applied to. Humans are not fungible cogs in a machine because, no offense, humans are not equal. And that shouldn't be a surprising thing for people to hear. That's just a false left-wing premise that has no basis in fact. In fact, the study of how different individuals and groups are has been formally studied for a long time and empirically known for even longer. A careful way to say that. So Disney is on a death spiral, and there is no fixing it. The Disney vibe of 1955 is just not possible in 2025. The country is too radically different. The country is a failing mess of garbage. 55 America was probably the peak of hope and confidence. Current year America is an unrecognizable third world, we'll say, hellhole. And just for comparison, like I said, go to an external search engine, type in BitChute and Disney, because the BitChute search engine sucks. You have to search outside of it. It'll take you to Disney channels within BitChute, and you can watch some of those old shows and spend a couple hours watching some of those old shows, and then look at the stuff they have, the Disney-owned subsidiaries today, Marvel and whatnot. And it's like you're on a different planet. You're in a different dimension. You've gone into the. It's like if someone saw back then what the future would hold, they would think, oh, the communists took over. The communists must have won. Yes, they did, but they didn't win openly. So the average American gets worse every year. Objectively, we'll say cognitive abilities to not trigger the algorithm has been dropping since the Department of Education was formed. Ironic. And oddly enough, instead of canceling it and letting private companies and maybe the state handle it at local levels, the left want more federal money to be spent on an institution that has failed since it started. You go, but that's throwing good money after bad. It doesn't make sense. It's just sunk cost investment fallacy because they don't care that it fails. They have to have centralized power, and we want decentralized power. And obviously, the white pill for us is there's a whole lot of ways in which we're making that happen with alternative media, alternative ways to fund that media, SubScribestar and GiveSendGo and all these other sorts of things, especially cryptos. Crypto's been very useful. They're hiring diversity hires at Disney who don't know anything about the projects or Disney and the Disney history. And it's hard to explain, but Disney used to matter in a way. It used to mean something in a way it doesn't mean something now. And they don't care about Disney or the things they're referring to. To say it like it was a pop culture American institution, like, yes, we know it's pop culture, it's just nonsense. But it was something different. And it was a positive thing. And now it's not a positive thing. It's just globalist propaganda, which is why they're in that. That's why they bought it. It's why they're in that business. They have no connection to Disney. They're kind of strangers to it and its connection to the past. They know how to use chatbots and AI, and the results are absolute garbage. Disney was created in a different America for a different American, so the people at Disney now are doing the bare minimum. They don't really know why they're doing what they're doing or how it's connected. People who have been introduced to Disney recently don't understand why it was such a cultural rock, because it didn't used to always be globalist yeast infection on screen. Disney used to be run by better people. Now it's run by activists who want to push propaganda. That's why they got into it. And the audience is rejecting it, which is nice to see, to the tune of $900 million last year, because they got hired because they could check a box, not because they were competent and they could make good things. So if the art director gets AI art for a background material, nobody cares. It's just crap that fell out the walls. Back in the day, Disney used to be a top-notch company where there was a lot of quality control. But that ship sailed, and it sailed for a lot of reasons. But American finances, inflation is also involved in this. Disney now is the name that brings up a memory of Disney from 40 plus years ago. It's when you flow hydrothermal silicon rich waters over wood long enough, the carbon gets replaced with silicon, so it's no longer a piece of wood. It's a stone that looks like wood. And actually, I forget the name of that. What would you call that? Anyway, so speaking of the Haunted Mansion, I think that was the not Eddie Griffin, Murphy, something Murphy, Eddie Murphy movie. I think they made that in the 80s, but they did a remake of it, and the movie came out a few years ago. You didn't see it. I think it was an all-black remake nobody saw. And Disney 100-year anniversary film was a year ago or 2 years ago, and they had some movie. I think she was a vaguely brownish princess, and she had to fight the patriarchy, who, of course, was a fair-skinned person of European descent, which is so on the nose it's touching the brain. Hey, Disney, you should make the heroine blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and the bad guy, I don't know, not maybe somewhere from an evil Middle Easterner. Oh, it turns out that people aren't so fungible after all. They say race isn't real or it didn't matter. Well, if the race didn't matter, they wouldn't be swapping out the characters. Make all the antagonists Indian, especially now with what's been going on, and see how well that goes over. It's like, it doesn't matter. We picked the best characters for the role. Oh, well, the best characters for the antagonists all happen to be, from the Middle East or something. Oh, yeah, it's obvious. It's obviously bullshit. I mean, like everything they say is a lie. I don't even remember the name of that film, but it lost money as well. So many Disney movies have lost money, and it will continue to do so. In a DEI workplace, nobody goes the extra mile. It's basically like Russia at the end of the 80s when infrastructure just massively collapsed because it was cascading failures where every piece involved in like a hydroelectric dam, every little bit was failing. And they needed to all work together at a certain level. Like it's the LATA. What you get is the LATA, where after 30,000 miles, the engine needs a complete ring, a complete rebuild because I don't know, the rings are leaking and the valve springs and the cam is worn out, and it's just like, yeah, cars should go longer than 30,000 miles, or when you beep the horn, the lights dim because it doesn't have enough current. Anyway, nobody fixes problems in current year from a person. How do I say this? A person above them on the oppression hierarchy, a brown person, basically, because they don't want to get fired for a microaggression. So the people at the bottom of the hierarchy, people like you and I, won't correct or offer advice to someone above them on someone who can call them istophobic, because the non-white can just get them fired, which is why you really only want to hire and work with your own kind, which might sound, well, it doesn't sound harsh if you're used to this channel, just because it's just safer that way. It's just kind of game theory where your people at the same level of you can't get you fired, and they're usually, the best anyway, so it's kind of a win-win. Yes, I know the SJWs aren't listening to this channel. And if they see someone going off track, what happens is if it's someone who can get them in trouble, they can't fix it. It's better to let it fail and be somebody else's problem. And Disney is learning that it's poison to a company, as well as Boeing and many other companies are learning what happens with Klaus Schwab's gift to the world. Disney used to be the top of the food chain, and that all ended decades ago, but it took this long to trickle down, and now the fruit of the poison tree is not the shiny apple it used to be. I don't even think people can understand the old Disney and how different it was when the country was so much different. Some would say nicer. I mean, that would be me. It was much nicer. In a high trust society. I'm trying to say Disney is like anachronistic in this current commercial zone Weimar country that used to be America. I mean, just call it Bank of America now or something. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys. Well, I'll see you all next year.